The quiet janitor stopped the CEO's elevator, then said, "You're under arrest." The story starts. In the heart of downtown Chicago, in a glass tower so tall it vanished into the morning haze, employees whispered a rumor that no one could prove, but everyone secretly believed, that the man mopping the marble floors on the 72nd story knew more about the building, its people, its secrets, its sins, than the CEO sitting behind the bulletproof office doors at the top. And if you had been there on the morning of February 12th, you would have seen something that nearly broke the internet later that night. The quiet janitor stepping directly in front of the CEO's private elevator, pressing his palm against the sensor panel to freeze the doors open, and telling the most powerful man in the building, "Sir, you're under arrest." At first everyone thought it was a prank, a stunt, some kind of YouTube social experiment, but the fear in the CEO's eyes said otherwise, and if you rewind just 48 hours, the terrifying truth behind that moment begins to unfold. The janitor's name was Evan Calder, a man in his late 50s, with shoulders slightly hunched from decades of manual work, or at least that's what everyone assumed. He hardly spoke, kept his head down, and moved with the slow, deliberate precision of someone who had spent his entire life scrubbing floors for people who never looked at the reflection staring back at them. But there was one person who did talk to him, who always talked to him: Maya Torres, a 26-year-old junior accountant who worked on the 34th floor. She would hand him a spare coffee every morning, smile, ask how his day was going, and Evan, who never opened up to anyone, would nod politely. Maya was the kind of employee who stayed late, closed deadlines, and worked herself to exhaustion, hoping someone would finally notice. Someone did, but not the someone she wanted. Everything changed on a Friday night when she was the last person left in the building, and the CEO, Daniel Kincaid, descended from the executive floor after a private client meeting. Security cameras later showed him weaving slightly, unsteady, carrying a half-finished tumbler of whiskey. Footage captured him trying to corner her in the accounting wing. She pulled away. He grabbed her wrist. She shoved him back. He stumbled, furious, and followed her down the hallway. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The next morning, the building announced that Maya had not shown up for work. HR sent out an email expressing concern. But by noon, the police were called to a hiking trail outside the city, where her body had been found in a ravine, bruised, cold, and staged to look like an accident. It would have worked. It should have worked. But Kincaid made one fatal mistake. He forgot that janitors see everything, especially Evan. That night, long after the building emptied, Evan had been completing his usual cleaning rounds when he noticed something unusual. The door to the accounting wing wasn't fully latched. Inside, a desk lamp was still on. Papers were scattered, and the floor, the polished marble Evan cleaned every evening, had a long streak of something faintly reddish that someone had tried wiping up too quickly. He didn't panic. He didn't call out. He quietly reached into his cart and pulled out a small black light normally used for stain detection. What glowed back at him wasn't coffee, wasn't ink. It was blood, diluted, smeared, but unmistakable. And in that moment, something very old inside Evan Calder awakened, something nobody in that building knew about, because decades earlier, before the uniform, before the mop, before life broke him, Evan had been Special Agent Evan Calder of the FBI's Internal Corruption Task Unit, a career cut short when a criminal he exposed retaliated by ambushing his wife and daughter. Evan left the bureau that day and never went back. But when he found Maya's blood, the instincts he buried under layers of grief came roaring back like a lit fuse. Instead of calling anyone, Evan accessed the maintenance security server using a login no janitor should have. But Evan wasn't a normal janitor. He watched the grainy footage, Maya rushing down the hallway, Kincaid following only seconds behind her. Then the feed cut for 22 minutes. When it resumed, Kincaid reappeared alone, sweaty, disheveled, looking around like a man rehearsing an alibi. But the real smoking gun wasn't the footage. It was the elevator logs. Someone had used the private executive elevator at 11:47 p.m., its biometric scanner registering Kincaid's thumbprint. Destination: basement level 4, where the underground garage connected to the service exit that led straight to the highway. Evan printed every file, copied every timestamp, and burned the entire 24 hours of footage onto a flash drive so small it could hide behind the label of a bleach bottle. And then, for the first time in 19 years, Evan made a call. "I'm reactivating badge 34-7-C, he said into the line. Silence on the other end. Then, "Calder, you're alive?" "I don't have time," Evan replied. "You're going to want to get a warrant ready. I'll bring you the man personally." He hung up before they could argue. The next morning, the news of Maya's tragic accident hit the company like a shockwave. Kincaid held a press conference in the lobby, chest puffed, crocodile tears dripping, voice trembling with hypocritical grief. Employees whispered condolences under the glass mezzanine. Evan stood quietly in the back, mop in hand, watching every lie slide out of Kincaid's mouth. When the conference ended, Kincaid entered his private elevator. Evan stepped closer. The doors began to close. He slapped his hand onto the sensor panel. The doors froze, and for the first time since he began working there, the building heard his voice. "Sir," he said calmly, "you're under arrest." Kincaid blinked, confused, then amused, then enraged. "Move, old man." Evan reached into his jumpsuit pocket and pulled out something no one expected, a worn, slightly faded leather wallet. Inside it, his still valid federal credentials. "Evan Calder, Federal Bureau of Investigation," he said. "You're being detained for the murder of Maya Torres." Gasps erupted. Kincaid lunged toward him, but Evan moved faster. A twist of the wrist, a precise pivot, and the CEO found himself face down on the marble floor, arms pinned behind him, with zip cuffs Evan had tucked inside his tool belt. Security rushed in, but Evan flashed his badge, ordering them back. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside the building. Agents swarmed the lobby, cameras flashed, phones recorded, and Kincaid, once the untouchable king of the tower, was dragged out in disbelief as employees watched from every floor like silent witnesses, finally seeing justice. But the story didn't end there, because when investigators examined the flash drive, they discovered something far worse than Maya's murder. A pattern. Kincaid had been covering up harassment, fraud, and interstate financial crimes for years. Maya had confronted him about bookkeeping discrepancies that linked him to offshore accounts. She wasn't just a target. She was a whistleblower who died for being honest. The FBI offered Evan reinstatement. He refused. He'd done his job. Justice was served. Or so he thought. 3 weeks later, during the final review of footage from that night, analysts found something subtle, something chilling. At 11:46 p.m., 1 minute before Kincaid took the elevator to the garage, another figure appeared in the hallway, partially hidden behind a column. A tall man in a dark suit. He watched everything. Then he stepped out of frame. The video froze on his last visible moment. Analysts enhanced the image, cleared the blur. And when Evan saw the printout later that evening, he went completely still. Because standing behind Kincaid, watching silently, was a man Evan had buried in his mind 20 years ago. The same man responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughter. The same man Evan thought was already dead. And at the bottom of the enhanced screenshot was a single handwritten note someone had slipped anonymously into the evidence folder. "Welcome back, Agent Calder. We've been waiting." The justice for Maya was real, but the real case, the one Evan thought he escaped, had just begun again. And this time, they were coming for him. If you want more dark, suspenseful, real-feeling stories like this, make sure you hit like, drop a comment about the twist, and subscribe for more narrations just like this one.